During the trip to work, a conversation that my wife started at dinner yesterday popped up in my head. This was not the first such dialogue, but its frequency seemed to be increasing, and I found myself at a loss as to the reasons for its constancy and significance. My wife urged me to tell her again about how many women I had before our exclusivity. In addition, she asked if I was harboring fantasies about these past mistresses and if I was thinking about them during our intimate moments. Obviously, the most correct answer to such questions was simple enough. After 5 years of marriage, my wife and I created a union that, although not perfect, deserved high marks in terms of trust, respect, love, intimacy, and friendship. I considered them vital to any relationship and sincerely believed that my wife shared this opinion. It seemed that we were living in an idyllic dream, a comfortable income from a full-fledged job, a strong marriage, a beautiful house in a prestigious area, funds and free time for vacations, and acquaintance with fine wines, food, and entertainment. My name is William Harrison, although my friends affectionately call me Billy. My wife's name is Molly. At 5 feet 11 inches tall, I have the characteristic features of Nordic origin, blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. But I have Irish blood in my veins, which periodically causes outbursts of rage. Fortunately, I managed to control this side of my temperament since school. Having learned during numerous meetings to appreciate communication, not physical struggle, as a child, I maintained a decent level of physical fitness by playing football and hockey all year round and spending a lot of time on weightlifting. And now, I keep running to keep fit. I actively participated in the adult soccer league and sometimes played hockey on the pond. My beloved wife Molly attracted the gaze with sparkling eyes, flawless skin, and such charming lips that they could conquer anyone who looked at her smile or listened to her speech. She had a natural ability to win over others easily, drawing them into fascinating conversations on almost any topic. Sincere interest in others made her an exceptional listener and an unbiased advisor. But this friendliness sometimes bordered on flirting or too casual behavior with people, blurring the boundaries of comfort and familiarity. But it was never a problem for me since Molly had an innate ability to stop a conversation before entering questionable territory. I thought Molly had the perfect character, at least in my eyes. There was one minor but occasionally annoying flaw because of which emotional discussions arose between us. Although they rarely escalated into a full-fledged dispute, it was Molly's firm determination when she decided to do something. She firmly adhered to her beliefs, especially in matters devoid of scientific evidence and clear data. As a result, she showed a certain stubbornness on certain issues, and when her opinion was formed, it was difficult for me to convince her. We both got married shortly after graduating from college, and we dated each other exclusively during the last 2 years of university. It is safe to say that Molly did not have time to experience a wide range of partners before we got married. I, on the other hand, led a more adventurous lifestyle during high school and in the first 2 years of college, enthusiastically studying relationships with different women. At the age of 19, I considered myself lucky when one of my first partners turned out to be an elderly divorced woman. She gave me invaluable knowledge about how to please a woman, and when Molly asked about my ability to give her great pleasure, I openly acknowledged the contribution of my previous experience. This revelation caused her to feel jealous as she began to realize the missed opportunities and various meetings that she had lost. I worked as a mechanical engineer at Abbott Labs, where my responsibilities included designing and testing injection molding components for medical devices such as ventilators and respirators. My latest endeavor is repairing a 2005 Winnebago B-Class van, a hobby that has taken me by storm. Meanwhile, Molly was thriving in her career as a chartered accountant, CPA, holding a coveted position in one of the top 5 accounting and consulting firms in the country. Her work brought a solid income, was not accompanied by excessive stress, and was sometimes associated with business trips when she accompanied junior accountants on company audits to ensure comprehensive coverage and compliance with the principles of the organization, which are exceptional customer service and deep reporting. Over the past month, Molly has gone on several trips with a young employee named Andrew, who recently graduated. Andrew began his 3-year path to becoming a certified public accountant, CPA, which involved obtaining qualifications and passing rigorous tests. After their first trip, Molly mentioned Andrew in passing, but since then, she has kept silent about him. In the course of our later life, I could not help noticing subtle changes in Molly's behavior and her manner of communicating with me. She became less energetic, sociable, and open in our communication. In addition, there have been several occasions in recent weeks when Molly came home from work later than usual. In a fit of passion, she tore off all my clothes and dragged me into our bed. It was during this intimacy that I felt that something was really igniting her desires. After making love, I went downstairs to cook, and Molly took a refreshing shower. Having decided to look into this issue, I decided to touch on this topic as soon as she joins me in the kitchen. When Molly finally came down the stairs and took her place, I plucked up the courage and spoke. "Molly, there's something we need to discuss, but I don't know how to approach it," I began, showing unfailing love and trust. Molly encouraged me. "Billy, come on, share what's on your mind. We love each other, and we can trust each other without hesitation. Actually, I also have something to discuss with you, but why don't you start first?" she suggested. Molly's playful response made me feel anxious. "Oh, Molly, that sounds a little ominous. How many conversations started with the phrase 'we need to talk' and eventually became a signal for the end of a marriage?" I expressed my concerns. Ignoring my concern, Molly calmed me down. "Don't be silly, Billy. There is nothing negative about it. Moreover, this is something that will benefit me, and I promise that it will bring great joy to both of us." Not knowing how to formulate my thoughts and ask a question, I plucked up the courage and continued, "Well, Molly, there's something wrong between us. You haven't been as open and affectionate as usual in the last few weeks," I began cautiously. Molly intervened, pointing to our recent intimate encounter. "Billy, didn't you notice how we just made incredible love?" "What is it?" she asked. "Molly, that's not what I meant," I clarified, but my anxiety still hadn't subsided. "Since you're talking about it, I can't help but ask what caused such a violent passion in you that you practically tore off my clothes instantly?" Molly's behavior changed. Tension, concern, and guilt appeared on her face. "Well, Billy, if you are not satisfied that I have a strong attraction to you, then perhaps you should solve this problem yourself," she replied defensively. Realizing the change in her attitude, I asked her about it. "Molly, I can see anxiety and guilt in your expression, and your defensive reaction is very noticeable. Don't you notice that? Please, I'm begging you, tell me what's really going on. Should I be worried about something that concerns you?" I insisted, seeking honesty and clarity. Molly's tone softened, and she finally apologized. "Billy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my reaction, Billy. I didn't mean to seem like this, and I really need to share with you what's going on. Please remember, first of all, that my love for you and our life together are boundless. What we have is incredibly important to me, and I want you to remember this during our conversation," Molly said sincerely. Her tone was filled with confidence and tenderness. "Now you've really got me worried, Molly." "What is it?" I asked with trepidation, fearing the worst. "Are you cheating on me?" "Billy, how can you say that? You know that I would never betray your trust and would not be unfaithful to you." "I respect you and our relationship too much," Molly replied, sounding offended but determined. "But I need to talk to you about something important, and I want you to listen to me without jumping to conclusions. When I tell you everything, you will be able to ask all the questions you are interested in, and we will be able to discuss everything openly. So, my love, I want to emphasize once again that my heart belongs only to you. I want to build a future with you, have children, grow old as a couple, and become your partner for life. Perhaps the information I'm about to share will not be easy to understand, but I ask you to listen to everything I have to say. It is important to understand the whole context. Remember I was talking about Andrew, my colleague with whom we went on business trips together? So, in addition to these trips, I also had lunch with him, participated in happy hours, and even had dinner with him last week. Molly, you said straight out that you don't cheat and don't have a love relationship, and now you admit to these actions. I'm not having an affair, and it's not cheating on you. I want to emphasize that I sincerely want you to listen to me, and I apologize if my previous statements seemed contradictory to you. You're right, I crossed the line by spending time with Andrew without telling you about it, but I want to assure you that I don't love him. We had a flirtation that seemed innocent at first but gradually became more and more questionable. Everything changed when he confessed his desire to have an intimate relationship with me. Despite the fact that he is 7 years younger, incredibly fit, and very handsome. I want you to understand that I am passionate about him, not in love." In a fit of anger, I stood up and asked, "Are you leaving me? Do you love him, or have you already had intimacy with him?" "No, Billy, I want to assure you once again that I have not had an intimate relationship with Andrew or with anyone else. Actually, this is part of the problem." "Please listen to me," Molly responded. "I only love you, Billy. Andrew is younger, and I could never develop romantic feelings for him. However, before I met you, I had limited experience. Sometimes I have the feeling that I missed a certain experience that you had before we became a couple. The thought that this young man, to whom I am undoubtedly attracted, wants an intimate relationship with me does not give me peace. Andrew and I flirted at work today, which may partly explain why I came home with such a strong desire, longing for your love," Molly explained. I felt my pulse quicken as she uttered these words. Molly did not expect such a reaction and hastened to retract her words. "Billy, I didn't put it quite right. I love you, and our intimate relationship means more to me than anything else. But it was difficult for me to get rid of Andrew's infatuation, and I made the difficult decision to act accordingly and enter into an intimate relationship with him as the only opportunity before we fully devote ourselves to building a future together. I need to get the last experience of communicating with another man. I think I deserve it, and I ask you to understand and allow me to do it. I want to convince you that I have always been sincere in my desire to never cheat on you and respect our relationship. That's why I'm openly talking about it and asking for your consent. But I must also say that I have already made a decision about what I will do next," Molly concluded. Stunned by the anger in my eyes as I pondered her words, Molly courageously stated, "Billy, I really only love you. I want to spend my whole life married to you and grow old together. What I feel for another man is not love. It's not easy for me, and I understand that you see this as a one-time opportunity to gain experience and ease your desires. But I want to make it clear that I am deeply hurt by this request and the hint that my consent will serve as proof of my love for you. It is difficult for me to understand that my consent to an action that goes beyond our obligations can fix or strengthen our relationship." When I got up from the table, a mixture of resentment and anger was reflected in my eyes. It was clear that Molly felt the consequences of her words. I hoped that at this moment she would think about whether her actions were harming our marriage and the ties that bind us. I needed her to understand how significant her request was and what consequences it could have for our relationship. I understand that when you found out about my emotional connection with one of your work colleagues, you felt cheated. Intimate conversations and walks together can be considered a form of infidelity, and I recognize the pain and distrust that this has caused in our relationship. But I want to convince you that I have not been physically intimate with this man, although I admit that I have exchanged a few kisses after happy hours. This does not excuse or justify my behavior. I understand the disbelief and resentment in your response, Billy, and I sincerely apologize for the pain I caused you. I have always believed in your unwavering trust and loyalty, but when I found out about your actions, I destroyed this idea, Molly confessed. Billy, please stop. Don't be so dramatic. I want you to understand that I love you and only you. You can trust me, and that's why I'm being honest about this. I never meant to hurt you. It's just about me and my personal problems. It's just a meaningless affair devoid of any deep meaning, okay? She pleaded. Billy, grow up and come back here. I understand that you may think that this situation will eventually lead to personal growth and allow you to give us even more love and attention in the future, Molly called out as I headed to my car. Molly, you are currently in a delusion. I can't understand how you expect me to accept your betrayal and just survive it while claiming that you love me. The truth is, I will never really be able to bridge this trust gap. If you decide to continue this affair, it will mean the end of our relationship. Do you understand the seriousness of this? With these words frozen in the air, I headed to my car, deciding to create a distance between us. Molly was calling me to follow her, begging, Billy, no, please come back. Anger and pain consumed my thoughts, and I could only stare at her in disbelief before driving off into the night. It was an irresistible moment of shock and confusion. In search of solace, I stayed overnight at the Hilton Hotel located in a nearby suburb. In search of escape from the turmoil, I spent too much time in the hotel bar, drowning my sorrows in alcohol. Eventually, I returned to my room and collapsed into bed, still reeling from the shock caused by the fact that Molly considered such a situation acceptable. Ignoring her calls and voice messages, I remained stunned and could not understand how she could confess her love to me and at the same time insist on violating our wedding vows. I was well aware of Molly's stubbornness when she made a decision, but now was not the time when I could just give in and leave everything as it is. It was a mistake that could ruin our marriage, and I had to convince her of it before the situation became irreversible. And yet, a doubt crept in. Isn't it too late? Even if I manage to convince her this time, how long will it take until she starts acting behind my back? Anyway, this will undoubtedly destroy the remnants of trust, respect, and ultimately our marriage. On the other hand, I understood that if I let her do this, I would never be able to perceive her in the same light. As I went through the options, doubts and fears began to cloud my thoughts. If I agree to her request, how long will it take before she feels compelled to seek solace in the arms of another man again? Will she resent me for allowing someone else to indulge her desires and not demanding loyalty from her only to me? It became clear that there was no choice, and a sense of impending doom hung over our relationship. Something inside me suggested that our path was already moving towards its tragic ending. Finally, I made a decision. The only glimmer of hope was to convince her to change her mind and go to counseling with me. Perhaps together, we could find the root cause of her need for intimacy outside of our marriage. Having made this decision, I highlighted Wednesday on the calendar, the day when I would touch on this topic and give my arguments. Feeling the weight of pain and sadness, I decided to call work and take a sick leave. As soon as I found out that Molly was gone, I went back to our house and focused on completing some unfinished van repair work. Physical work helped me to take my mind off the constant emotional turmoil. For a while, I installed and successfully connected the solar panel, made sure that all the electrical components were in order, and refilled the water tanks. I knew that one more day of work on assembling the body, and on Thursday, the van would be ready for the trip. When Molly was only a couple of hours away from returning, I plunged into these affairs, seeking solace amid the heartache. After carefully studying the issues related to divorce, financial issues, and seeking professional help, I felt that I had a preliminary plan of action for both possible outcomes that awaited me. With a sense of urgency, I looked around our house and made a list of my personal belongings, focusing on those that were of great importance to me. Time was running out, and I managed to get to the bank before Molly returned. At the bank, I quickly took action, canceled our shared credit card, and opened a credit card only in my name. Similarly, I closed our joint checking account and opened an individual account in my name. I decided to prepay the mortgage loan over the next 2 months using funds from our shared account. After that, I divided the remaining amount in half, giving Molly a check for her share, and put my part into a personal savings account. Feeling mixed emotions, I sought solace in a place where I could think. I frequented a bar where I drank beer and ate a hamburger, preparing for the upcoming conversation with Molly. About 6 o'clock in the evening, Molly returned home and seeing me immediately expressed her concern and disappointment about my sudden departure. "Billy, please don't ever leave like that without telling me if you're okay," she begged. "I understand that you're hurting, but I was really worried about you and should have known that you were safe." "Molly, I used to have no doubt that our love is indestructible and durable, but recent events have made me doubt the foundation of our relationship. A week ago, I could not have imagined that you would ask me for consent to an extramarital affair, and then you would continue to live as if nothing had happened. It is incomprehensible to me that you can confess your love to me, claim that we will always be together, and at the same time ask for permission to have an extramarital affair," I explained. "Molly, don't think I'm questioning your love for me, but please understand that asking for permission does not negate the fact that it contradicts the oath we made to each other. This is still a violation of trust and our obligations. It is important to understand the seriousness of this situation and the impact it can have on our relationship, both now and in the future," I continued. "Molly, if you want to talk about drama and immaturity, it pales in comparison to what I'm feeling right now. I look at the person I once loved, and I doubt if I know who you really are. You're asking me to accept that you love me, and at the same time, you're asking me to accept that you're going to have intimacy with another man over the weekend and just go back to our previous state as a couple and partners. But deep down, I know that things will never be the same again. Our relationship will never be able to return to what it was before. What do you think, Molly? How would you feel if I engaged in intimacy with someone else and then told you that it was a common thing? It wouldn't be fair, and you know it. Yes, I've had experiences with other women in the past, but that doesn't excuse or make this situation any less hurtful. I understand that it seems to you that in your past, you missed various opportunities while I had such opportunities. Answering your question, I will say that if I started an affair, I would expect consequences, including the possibility that I would be asked to leave and the uncertainty that I would be forgiven. So why should the circumstances be different for you? Why shouldn't I think about asking you to leave? And why do you think I can easily forgive you? Emotions overwhelmed Molly, and she answered with tears in her eyes, "Billy, I can't imagine life without you." But I interjected, "Molly, that's not quite right. By the way, have you already agreed to go through with this? Have you already promised your potential lover that you will be his?" "Billy, why are you changing everything?" "He's not my lover," Molly tried to defend herself. I was stunned by Molly's confession, who confirmed that she had indeed arranged with her potential partner for a trip that would start in the morning and last until Sunday evening. Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but express my serious concern. "And on Monday, you think that everything will go back to normal? That you will become the best wife I could hope for?" I said. "Molly, you've been like this before, but if you decide to go through with it, it won't happen anymore." Molly gasped in response, retreating to the kitchen and sitting down at the table. She begged, "Billy, please don't let this ruin our marriage, our life together. You have always been and will always be my husband, the one with whom I want to raise our children. You mean everything to me." Feeling the deep difference between us, I couldn't help but shake my head and say softly, "Molly, we're just not on the same wavelength anymore. If everything you just said was true, you would never even think about starting what you're going to do on Saturday. It looks like this conversation will lead to nothing. I want to make it clear that if you follow your plan, our relationship will end. I will be back on Friday evening, as already mentioned. Molly, please don't ask me to stay when you're making a choice that jeopardizes our marriage. We can't just brush it off. Let's try to find a way out of this difficult situation. I'll bring dinner around 7 on Friday night. By the way, what time is Andrew picking you up on Saturday morning, just so I know?" Molly replied, "I'll tell him to pick me up at 11 a.m., but please understand that you don't have to leave. In fact, I want you to meet him." Anger flared up in me, and I answered, "To get acquainted? If I see him, I might just throw you both out." Instead of responding to you with anger, perhaps you should express gratitude that I didn't completely cut you out of my life. Take the time to think carefully about your actions before we meet on Friday. This is already causing significant damage to our relationship, and you seem to underestimate this fact. Here's one promise I'll make: if you stop this affair and let him know that you don't want to meet him anymore either now or in the future, and if you commit to attending consultations with me to work on restoring our relationship, then we may have a chance to recover. But if you don't, then I know for sure that our marriage won't be over. Please give me your answer on Friday evening. In the meantime, take the time to really think about the consequences of your actions for our lives." With a heavy heart, I turned away and left the house, returning to the Hilton Hotel where I booked a room for the night from Wednesday to Thursday. Realizing the urgency of the situation, I contacted my boss and explained that there were extraordinary family circumstances requiring a week's absence. Despite his reluctance to explain the circumstances, he reluctantly agreed to give me a day off on Thursday morning. After Molly left for work, I returned to the house and calmly began to pack my things. I carefully selected items that Molly wouldn't have noticed missing right away and prepared them for transportation to my van. In addition, I decided to stop by the store to part with clothes that I no longer wore and considered unnecessary for my future journey. I collected all the tools, sports equipment, and recreational items that I just didn't have room for and brought them to my best friend Tom's house. In addition, I shared several drawings made with pen and ink by my uncle, knowing that he would appreciate them. When we sat down at the table with beers in our hands, I explained the situation and talked about the options that, in my opinion, were available to me. Tom looked at me with disbelief and strongly expressed his doubts, insisting that Molly would never do this to me. He stressed that he had never seen a woman so much in love with a man as Molly was with me. Tom questioned my confidence in the correctness of the decision, suggesting that perhaps something else was going on with Molly that required a decision right now. I felt incredibly lost and insecure. Everything I thought I knew was destroyed in 1 week, and Molly seemed to have turned into a completely different person. Her actions confused me, and I'm trying to figure it all out. Can't we just forgive and forget? Can't we seek advice and find a way to move on? I told her that we still have a chance to save our relationship if she refrains from continuing this affair, but if she goes for it, I don't see any way to reconciliation. I did my best to bring her to reason, but now on Friday evening, I hope that having shown love and care, she may want to listen to the voice of reason. This is really my last opportunity. It's hard to see the pain my marriage has caused, especially when we were once a shining example of a healthy relationship. I promised a friend that we would keep in touch, and as soon as I have a new phone and number, I will definitely write it to him. We will keep each other up to date. With these thoughts in mind, I went to the Verizon store to get a new phone and number. I got a new phone and number, ensuring that our current plan was transferred exclusively to Molly's name. Having settled all the practical issues, I returned home, focusing on the van again. I completed the rest of the cabinet work and then got down to practical things like getting new license plates and updating insurance coverage. Then I turned my attention to our home computer, carefully cleaning it of all traces of personal email and documents. I wanted to remove all traces of my past life from the office. In addition, I wrote a letter informing our family, friends, relatives, and colleagues about Molly's actions and my reaction to them in order to give them an explanation in this difficult situation. If, despite all my efforts, I failed to dissuade Molly from her decision, I would have no choice but to explain to our family, friends, relatives, and colleagues that she decided to enter into an extramarital affair, actively seeking my approval despite my requests to change her mind. I made it clear that I had warned her that this would lead to the breakup of our marriage, but she continued anyway. I never wanted to talk about it, but I wanted people to understand the truth about what happened on Friday. I continued the conversation with the divorce lawyer to get recommendations on the possible outcome of our situation. Considering that our incomes were comparable and we had no children, I learned that the typical divorce option most likely involves dividing the entire property 50-50. No matter how hard it was at heart, it was necessary to collect this information and prepare for the fact that the trial could be continued. While most aspects of a potential divorce settlement seemed relatively straightforward, there was some uncertainty as to whether Molly would be eligible for half of my 401k retirement plan. Considering that Molly had been making significant contributions for a long time, there were more than $200,000 in deferred tax funds in this account. In addition, Molly was insured under a defined benefit pension plan, so it was difficult to predict how this factor would affect the divorce process. After careful consideration, I came to the conclusion that I had worked hard to save this money. Instead of risking losing 50% due to my wife's infidelity, I decided to accept a 40% tax penalty and withdraw the money before the divorce process begins. It was a difficult choice, but it provided some control and protection of the financial assets that I had been accumulating. I decided to postpone making any financial decisions until the weekend because I still had hope that I could convince Molly to change her mind and put an end to this terrible situation. I exhausted all attempts to reason with her, and as Friday approached, I was overcome by a feeling of helplessness and uncertainty about our future in our marriage and in my love for her. Now everything was in Molly's hands, and I could only pray that she made the right choice. I went back to our house and waited impatiently for Molly to come home from work. When she entered the kitchen, her face lit up with excitement, expressing how much she missed my presence at home. "Thank you for coming home, Billy," she said sincerely. "I really missed you, and I can't bear it when you're not with me. Promise me you won't leave like that again." "You're right, Molly. We love each other, and we should be together," I said, trying to put aside my doubts for a while. "Why don't you go freshen up and take a shower? When you come back downstairs, I'll light the grill, and we can enjoy a lovely dinner together tonight. We will cherish what our marriage means to us." Molly was visibly upset when I mentioned the uncertain future of our relationship. "Billy, please stop saying that. It upsets me when you question our marriage," she replied, growing increasingly annoyed. Realizing that continuing the conversation could only lead to further escalation of tension, I sighed. "My Molly, let's postpone this conversation for now. We'll continue later. Let's focus on enjoying this evening. Let's focus on enjoying our evening and move on to the pleasant part," I suggested. "Of course, Molly," I replied. "I promise that I will stay with you tonight and will not leave you feeling offended or worried about my well-being." When Molly came back from the shower, I turned to her and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Molly, you look amazing." I sincerely praised her. Smiling mischievously, she replied, "Well, I want to give you an idea of what our next few weeks will be like." She showed me that she bought different outfits for me so that I could enjoy them. "Now let's move on to the food." "I'm hungry, but I want to eat dessert," she added playfully. We hurriedly started eating, quickly finishing the main course, striving to move on to the sweet finale and meet the coming weeks with excitement and anticipation. I gently lifted Molly in my arms and carried her upstairs, laying her on the bed. She was panting, feeling completely satisfied and rested from our intimate meeting, and soon fell asleep. The next morning, Molly woke up at 8:30 a.m., which meant it was time to get ready for the day ahead. Andrew was supposed to pick her up at 11 o'clock. Molly's thoughts were filled with guilt, anxiety, and a hidden desire. Remembering the passionate lovemaking the night before, she doubted for a moment, could anything surpass it? But the determined attitude reminded her of the commitments she had made and of the need to bring her decision to an end. Despite her doubts, Molly decided to continue the planned date, albeit with mixed emotions and a sense of uncertainty about what lies ahead. "Billy, last night was just incredible," she said, her voice filled with love and appreciation. "This is how I imagine our future. I love you very much and thank you for last night. When I didn't get an answer, I concentrated on finishing my scrambled eggs, asking Molly if she wanted anything else. She hesitated and replied, "I'd better not eat now, Billy, but thanks anyway. I need to get ready. Andrew and I have a brunch scheduled at 11 o'clock, and I want to keep my appetite for it." Understanding her need for privacy, I nodded and continued to work on breakfast, giving her the freedom of action necessary to start the day. "Please, Molly, let's take the time to hug and say a heartfelt goodbye before you leave for the weekend," I sincerely asked. "Does last night and our love have any meaning for you? Please think about ending it now." Molly interrupted me, urging me to stop. "It's just one time," she insisted. "It won't change my love for you or your love for me." Feeling a mixture of anger and sadness, I shook my head in disbelief. "I'm not leaving until I have a chance to say goodbye," I said firmly. Molly met my gaze, her cheeks flushed in response to my remark. "Billy, never forget that we will always be together," she confirmed. "Our future holds the potential for growth and strength." "Yes, of course, Molly," I replied, feeling angry. "I'm incredibly angry that you can even believe in such words." An expression of understanding appeared on Molly's face as she realized the full weight of my words. When tears welled up in her eyes, Molly turned abruptly and hurried to the bathroom. She took a quick shower and carefully applied makeup. By the time she came out of the bathroom with a weekend bag in her hands, precious minutes were slipping away, and time was limited. I can't express all the huge anger and pain that gripped me when I saw her getting dressed to meet another man, I said. It pierced my heart with deep sadness. "Billy, are you okay?" Molly asked, her voice full of concern. "Molly," I began, struggling for words. "Last night, I wanted it to be a really special moment for both of us. It was supposed to be a celebration of the love and connection we shared throughout our marriage. I wanted our last evening together to be a memory that we will cherish." A heavy silence hung between us while I absorbed my words, experiencing deep emotions. "Please don't talk about this as our last night together," she insisted. "We must look to the future where we can overcome this challenge and become stronger than ever before. This is our last opportunity to move away from the nightmare you created and find a way back to the love and trust we once shared, Billy. Please stop insisting that everything is wrong. This situation goes beyond a simple one-time affair. It's about solving deeper problems in a relationship and finding healthier ways to self-actualize. My past experience does not change the fact that this decision has a significant impact on us. I understand your desire to satisfy this physical need, but can't you see that this changes everything? This is not just a matter of physical relaxation, it affects the very basis of our relationship." Before Molly could answer, our conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car approaching the entrance and a horn honking. The beep sounded again, and Molly asked if she should let Andrew in and introduce him to me, hoping that this would reassure me that he was just an attractive young man for her and did not pose a threat to our love. I recoiled from this suggestion and shouted, "Don't even think about letting him in here, otherwise, I'll do something I'll regret later." My words hung in the air, reflecting the depth of my suffering. Molly pulled back in shock, clearly startled by the force of my outburst. She had never seen this side of me. My anger had reached a boiling point, threatening to destroy any semblance of control. Molly silently picked up her bag and headed for the door, realizing that continuing the conversation would only lead to further tension. The gravity of the situation hung in the air as she left. I sat down on the kitchen chair, lost in thought. Despite my attempts to prevent this affair from destroying our marriage, Molly seems determined to go her own way, arguing that it will somehow benefit us and satisfy personal needs. It became clear that we are in different spheres of understanding. After 30 minutes, I realized that I needed a change of scenery. Obeying this impulse, I got up and began to transfer all the things that I listed as important to me to the van. Starting in the bedroom, I noticed that Molly had left her wedding rings in a vase on the dresser. I put them carefully in my pocket, feeling sad and submissive at the same time. 2 hours later, I moved all the things that mattered to me, securely packing them into the van. This process served as a physical reminder of the decision I had made and that we both had a long way to go. Anger and pain overwhelmed me, and I wandered around the house in boiling confusion. My eyes fell on our wedding album, a collection of 40 precious photos that captured memories of our wedding 5 years ago. Overwhelmed with emotions, I rushed to the garage, found a box cutter among the remaining tools, and returned to the house with frantic haste. Page by page, I couldn't hold back my disappointment any longer. I cut a deep cross through the plastic covering each photo and threw them into the fireplace with force. The crackling flames greedily consumed the remnants of what had once been a symbol of our love. Going to the desk, I sat down at it, my heart heavy with grief and determination. I started writing my last letter to Molly. Molly, as you probably already guessed, this is my final goodbye to you. I couldn't look you in the eye, seeing you walking away from me and from our once valuable marriage. When I saw that your wedding rings were lying in a bowl on the dresser, it gave the situation a deep symbolism. It seemed to me that you abandoned our obligations, knowing that wearing these rings would force you to face the reality of your infidelity, a reality that you wanted to avoid in pursuit of a free weekend. It's hard for me to understand how you could believe without the slightest doubt that you could have an affair and then return to our marriage as if nothing had changed. I sincerely cannot understand what you were thinking and how you could consider it acceptable to break our sacred wedding vows. By your act, you have caused me great humiliation and disrespect in our marriage. To think that a banal, seemingly harmless affair on the weekend should not affect my feelings for you is a big misconception. In fact, it meant everything. She showed me a striking discrepancy between my love for you and the love that you supposedly felt for me if it existed at all. It showed a huge gap between what I thought I deserved and what I foolishly thought we shared. You've hurt me more deeply than any other I've ever experienced. You took my love for you, ruthlessly tore it out of my chest, and ruthlessly trampled on it. The first betrayal happened when you started flirting with your lover during dinners and happy hours. Kissing during such meetings has further strengthened your infidelity while you mistakenly consider it acceptable. But the final blow to our mutual love was dealt when you decided that I would agree to your betrayal. How could you believe that you deserve this and that my love for you is capable of such betrayal? I am amazed at how your mind came to such an idea, and trying to reason with you, you decided to neglect me. I have made it clear that our love, our marriage, and our friendship will never remain unchanged in light of your actions. You dismissed my concerns by calling me immature and dramatic. I begged you to stop this weekend affair even before it happened, offered to consult a psychologist, and make efforts to save our marriage, but my words were ignored. I made it clear that the incredible night of love we shared would be our last if you continued your romance, but you decided to ignore my warning, believing that I would simply obey and be by your side regardless of the consequences. I don't understand how you could believe that I would agree to such a betrayal. It's like you've never really known me. I trusted you so much that I didn't even know you were capable of such destruction. Perhaps I could have physically intervened to prevent you from carrying out your plan, but deep down, I knew that this would only create resentment between us and lead to the slow destruction of our marriage. Your belief that this was an isolated incident is just self-deception. If this experience was unsatisfactory, how long would it take until the moment when you would be looking for another attraction to satisfy your desires? And if the meeting was pleasant, how soon will your fantasies push you to repeat it? These questions haunt me, emphasizing the essence of the problem. It is likely that you would hide future cases of infidelity, especially now that we are faced with the devastating consequences of your actions. but I have no doubt that these infidelities would have continued and continued to destroy the fabric of our relationship. The truth is that I can never be in a relationship without trust, and your actions have completely destroyed my trust in you. I cannot imagine that I will be able to love you again if I am tormented by thoughts about whether you are really present next to me or whether your mind wanders in fantasies about other lovers during our intimate moments. With every step you took away from our house, it seemed to me that all the love, respect, trust, and friendship that you claimed were washed away, leaving me with only the remnants of unfulfilled promises. I can't find the strength to forgive you for the pain you caused, and I can't imagine that I will ever be able to trust you or maintain friendly relations with you. Just as you callously ripped love out of my chest, I have to cut you out of my life. There are several practical issues that I need to solve. I divided our property and took care of the mortgage payments for the next 2 months. Enclosed in this envelope is a check for your half of our joint accounts. As of Monday, I canceled our joint Verizon account, so you'll have to start your own. I've also canceled our insurance policies and joint credit cards, so you'll have to issue your own. I legally removed my name from the mortgage loan and prepared a document renouncing ownership, transferring ownership of the house to you. It's up to you to decide whether to sell it or continue living in it, since this is no longer my home, and I do not intend to return there. As you can see, I sold my car and decided to live in a van. In the future, I may pawn your wedding rings to get money for gasoline. At least I will find some practical use for them. Despite the pain and anger caused by your act, I must admit that I acted in a fit of emotion. I regret to inform you that, in a moment of anger and despair, I succumbed to my emotions and behaved destructively. As you can see, I took a box cutter and cut our wedding album, as a result of which some remnants of the photos are now scattered in the fireplace. If you think it's appropriate, please burn them. I think it would be appropriate as a symbolic cremation of our marriage. In addition, I must admit that I wrote an email addressed to our friends, relatives, colleagues, and acquaintances, in which I informed them of your decision to continue infidelity outside of our marriage. I also announced my decision that I cannot tolerate such betrayal and am leaving you. Please understand that this revelation will give you a day or two to think about how you want to present your version of events, but I strongly recommend that you think about taking responsibility for your actions as you embark on a new life. Now, I allow you to search for any experiences and novelties that you want. You can do what you aspire to, which made you drop our relationship like yesterday's newspaper. But I urge you to refrain from having affairs with married people, as your actions have already caused enough harm to innocent lives. Feel free to divorce me, sell the house, move in, and make a decision about your future. I'm leaving all these questions in your hands because they don't matter to me anymore. If I am lucky enough to find a woman who really loves and respects me the way I deserve, I will be glad for this opportunity in my life. Then perhaps it will be possible to turn to the topic of divorce in due time. My attention is currently focused on something else. I decided to quit my job and cash out my 401k fund. The only thing I plan to do at the moment is to completely break all ties with you and never come across you again. When I leave, I'll turn left off the roadway, leaving the memory of you in the rearview mirror. Goodbye, Molly. Finally, I started sending the letter I had written, intended for all our friends, relatives, and acquaintances, setting the mailing date for Monday. By this time, I should have moved away from my old life a long time ago. With one last look, I turned away and walked out the door, rushing away from the remnants of my past. I was driving along the banks of the mighty Mississippi, thinking about my next actions. I decided to trace her path from Minneapolis-St. Paul to the bustling city of New Orleans. When I get to this destination, I have to make a fateful decision, figuratively speaking, to the left or to the right. During the long hours spent on the road, I couldn't stop thinking about Molly and whether I was making the right choice. But I have come to the conclusion that now is not the time to make immediate decisions about our future. It's going to be weeks before I can even consider the possibility of friendship, let alone remaining married. At that moment, my anger overshadowed all thoughts of reconciliation, but I understood that there might come a moment when my anger would subside and the desire to be with Molly would outweigh the pain caused by her act. Only then could I truly appreciate how much more important it is for me to be with her than without her. Molly had to explain to her parents, relatives, and friends her incomprehensible state of mind and the reasons that prompted her to decide on a fleeting intimate contact. She expected that each of them would have difficulty understanding her train of thought or agreeing with her point of view. In fact, it was difficult for her to understand her own reasoning right now, let alone explain it to others. She had to face reality. She convinced herself that this affair would not affect her emotional state in any way, realizing that serious challenges lie ahead, both for her and for us as a couple. I realized that any path to a potential reconciliation would require sincere efforts aimed at overcoming the difficulty of the situation. Molly was forced to articulate the depth of her new understanding of the devastating impact her actions had on our marriage and the love we once shared. She had to face the harsh reality of her own self-centeredness and stupidity when she underestimated the importance of loyalty, not only for me but also for her own sense of integrity. Now she understood the consequences of this, from the loss of respect from our family and friends to the growing distance in their relationship with her. Overwhelmed by the weight of her mistakes, Molly turned to my best friend, Tom Wickley, desperately begging for any information about my whereabouts or contact details. She begged him to tell me that she still loves me despite the damage she caused. At this moment of reflection and remorse, Molly was confronted with a painful truth, and she dreamed of an opportunity to express her sincere remorse and love. Having finally realized the seriousness of her actions and accepted responsibility for the betrayal in our marriage, Molly was now eager to talk to me. She desperately begged my friend Tom to convey her sincere apologies and asked me to tell her that she loves and misses me very much. Molly wants me to tell you that she loves you very much, that she recognizes the scale of her mistakes, and is ready to do everything possible to survive this if you give her a chance, Tom conveyed on her behalf. She wants you to know that she will never seek a divorce and remains firmly faithful to your marriage vows. Moreover, she promises not to enter into any romantic or love relationships with men as long as you are married. Week after week, Molly anxiously waited for an answer or at least a phone call, hoping for the possibility of reconciliation. But there were no contacts. In her desire to fulfill her commitment, she refused to meet and communicate, preferring a lonely existence both at work and at home. Molly didn't give up hope, praying that circumstances would somehow lead me back to her. She remained stubborn in her desire to preserve our marriage and faithfully waited for my return. About a month later, an unexpected incident occurred. Andrew opened the door and saw the attacker wearing a mask and carrying a police baton. The attacker quickly struck Andrew with 2 blows, after which he inflicted several painful kicks to the groin before leaving. The attacker sent a message in which he stressed that it was not worth contacting married women. After that, the attacker fled the scene. As a result of what happened, Andrew experienced excruciating pain and also became a reminder of the consequences that can arise when violating the boundaries of what is permitted. Of course, you understand who this attack was. I followed Molly's life and wanted her to suffer as I suffered, and maybe even more. Of course, Molly lied that she would wait for me until the last moment and would not enter into romantic and intimate relationships. 2 months after my departure, she brought another young man to our house, and it was hardly a friendly meeting. Soon, Molly sold the house and moved into a modest apartment. She always dreamed of breast augmentation and decided on plastic surgery with the money she received from the sale of the house, but a week later, a blood clot came off. They didn't have time to save her. Her death was instantaneous, as well as my trust in her. After learning this tragic news, I didn't even cry. Did I no longer feel love, anger, or regret for this woman? Story 2. Hi, my name is Jake. I'm 37 years old. For 3 wonderful years, I was married to Leah, who is 30 years old. We were like 2 drops of water, similar to each other, deeply in love and inseparable. But my world collapsed when I found out that Leah betrayed our relationship by cheating on me. Now, as I write these words, my heart is unbearably heavy, and I hope that sharing my story will bring me at least some consolation. It all started a few years ago at a noisy street festival in our city, where it seemed fate itself intervened in our relationship. Leah and I constantly crossed paths in a sea of people. When our paths crossed at this festival for the last time, we couldn't help laughing, realizing that we had met each other at least 6 times that day. Believing in the power of the universe to put everything in its place, I took this second meeting as a message from fate itself. The green-eyed blonde of medium height whom I constantly encountered seemed familiar to me. That's why I wanted to start a conversation with her. Our communication was easy, and every aspect of her personality radiated perfection. During the conversation, her mind shone. It dawned on me that she had recently started her career as a physics professor at our local state college. This realization seemed important to me, primarily because her appearance did not quite match the stereotypical image of a professor. From her slim build and youthful complexion, it was easy to mistake her for a recent college graduate. Initially, I did not consider the possibility of dating Leah but perceived her as an incredibly smart friend who sometimes scared me with her genius. But when our bond began to grow stronger, and we began to spend more time together, I felt that I fell deeply in love with her. She also valued my communication and gradually took a liking to me. About 2 months after our first meeting, she started sleeping in the same bed with me. From time to time, she sought comfort from me, sought advice when she had problems with her then boyfriend. Over time, our relationship became more intimate. I understand that this was wrong, but I let it happen because she assured me that she was on the verge of breaking off her relationship with her boyfriend. After a few weeks of our newfound intimacy, she ended her relationship with him. She explained this by saying that he lacked intellectual compatibility and their personalities were fundamentally different. Although her reasons for breaking up the relationship seemed disturbing to me, I felt relieved that we were now together. But I didn't know yet that I had unknowingly fallen into a trap. We continued dating for 9 months and eventually got married. I was genuinely and passionately in love with her. We imagined a future in which we would grow old next to each other. Even before the wedding, Leah and I signed a contract to start a family at an early age. I loved children very much and didn't want to wait until I turned 40 to feel like a father. I wanted to spend a lot of time with my children, watch them grow, and give them the fatherly love that I missed so much. At first, our marriage seemed flawless, but about a year after the wedding, we were faced with a heartbreaking reality: Leah couldn't get pregnant. In the second year of our marriage, this became an even greater cause for sadness for me. We explored all possible options, conducted many tests trying to identify the cause of Leah's inability to conceive, but to our bewilderment, all the results turned out to be clean. Secretly, I even went through several examinations myself, desperately hoping to find any underlying problems. But each time, I received encouraging results. Unlike Leah, who seemed completely calm, I couldn't help but feel a growing unease. My hopes of starting a family in the second year of our marriage were not fulfilled, and, to tell the truth, it weighed on my heart, fueling a feeling of great anxiety. Traditionally, it is believed that women bear the burden of longing for children, but in our particular case, Leah turned out to be surprisingly unperturbed due to our inability to conceive a child. She always answered, "Don't worry, the time will come when we will be destined to have a child," and she easily returned to her daily affairs. At times, I was forced to cut off any mention of this topic because it caused her to react, making me feel that I was exaggerating or blaming her for our difficulties. Therefore, I decided to refrain from further discussion of this topic, respecting her point of view. I'm aware that the details I'm about to share are of a deeply personal nature, but it is very important for me to express these thoughts because they play an important role in completing my story. Despite the fact that we were unable to conceive a child, I did not allow this failure to cast a shadow on our marriage. On the contrary, I saw it as an opportunity to strengthen our bond and cherish the precious moments spent with Leah before the children appeared. And yet, over time, I could not help noticing changes in her behavior and demeanor. Over time, there was a feeling that we became just strangers living under the same roof. I worked at a construction site and often did not have the opportunity to personally meet most of my colleagues and clients. Surprisingly, Leah seemed to have an uncanny knowledge of their names, appearance, behavior, and attitudes. This was due to the fact that we got into the habit of sharing with each other the smallest details of our working days. Similarly, I found myself well aware of the students enrolled in her courses, their names, appearance, and even the problems they faced. I knew not only about difficult students but also about wonderful ones, all thanks to Leah's tendency to share stories about her students and her working days in general. But something changed, and you may be interested to know how it happened. Let me explain. Suddenly, our once regular conversation stopped, and I was at a loss as to what could have caused such a change. At first, I brushed it off, thinking she was just having a hard day. But sometimes the bad days turned into weeks, and the weeks gradually turned into months. We found ourselves in a prolonged state of disconnection that we had never experienced before. When I tried to start a conversation, Leah either stated that she was busy at the moment or promised that we would talk later, which never happened. As if that wasn't enough, our intimate life suffered too. It got to the point where I begged her for even the simplest touch, but no matter how hard I tried, she wouldn't agree. On the contrary, she was offended and ran out of the bedroom every time. It was like a blow to my self-esteem, and my heart was shattered. It was hard not to feel that she was depriving me of my husband's rights, and it seemed that she was deliberately avoiding the possibility of having a child. Despite my deep love for her, I became more and more patient, trying to hush up this problem. Strangely enough, I continued to believe that eventually, she would realize that her actions were alienating us from each other and would try to fix the situation. But the hope for this collapsed as she continued to move away, and our relationship deteriorated to such an extent that we became like neighbors harboring enmity towards each other. Our once vibrant communication suffered greatly, and we found ourselves in a state of eternal disagreement. Perhaps I should have investigated to find out the reasons for her sudden change, but in a state of blinded love, I was guided solely by the desire to save our relationship. Desperate, I made a compromised decision to prove my willingness to mend relations, hoping that this would change the situation. In a serious conversation with Leah, I said that it no longer mattered to me whether we would have a child or not, and assured her that we could spend the rest of our lives together without one. Surprisingly, this statement seemed to lift her spirits for a whole week. I noticed small changes in Leah's behavior as our intimacy gradually resumed, despite the fact that it was somewhat forced. I appreciated the temporary respite from the emotional distance between us. But as suddenly as it all started, a week later, she returned to her cold and distant behavior. It seemed that the warmth and happiness she showed were nothing more than a facade, a temporary mask that she put on before finally growing off. This continuous cycle of fluctuating emotions caused me deep disappointment. The impact of these experiences affected all aspects of my life, affected my performance, and even my ability to sleep peacefully. I often hear spouses living under the same roof saying that they managed not to communicate for several days and not to have meaningful conversations, and I wonder how they manage it. In my situation, the lack of communication greatly affected my mental state. But Leah seemed to remain calm. She returned home from work in high spirits, cooked her own food, and then immersed herself in books and a laptop for the rest of the evening. When fatigue finally overcame her, she went to bed without a murmur. Because of the stark contrast between our experiences, I felt increasingly isolated and abandoned. While my loneliness grew more severe, Leah seemed to leave me wallowing in her emotional loneliness. When the third anniversary of our acquaintance was approaching, I decided to rectify the situation and devote a whole week to its celebration. I bought a special gift and planned to invite her to a recently opened elite restaurant in the city. With great impatience, I made all the necessary preparations, even booked a table for us throughout the day. I sent her numerous reminders in the form of text messages, desperately hoping that she would not forget about our plans. But the evening came, and she still did not appear. Moreover, she didn't come home at all that evening, leaving me devastated and abandoned. To my horror, Leah explained the reason for her absence, saying that she had fallen asleep at a colleague's while working on a joint project. It was the last blow that destroyed all my hopes. I've reached a breaking point, emotionally exhausted, mentally drained, tired of constant shocks. I couldn't take it anymore. Despite the constant thoughts about the possible infidelity of Leah, which haunted me, I decided to treat her with understanding, not recognizing the possibility that she had withdrawn from our relationship. Nevertheless, this incident was a turning point that forced me to face the painful reality lurking in the shadows until now. Just the thought that the woman I loved and cherished had entered into an affair with someone else left me completely shattered and devastated. After the events that unfolded in the week of our anniversary, I made the difficult decision to look for answers. Overcome by doubts and suspicions, I turned to the internet and sought the help of a private detective to find out all the hidden truths about Leah's actions behind my back. While the investigator was quietly tracking her down, I tried to distract myself by plunging back into the world of dating. It was on those nights when I knew Leah was already completely exhausted and asleep that I sought solace in these new meetings. I thought about using her fingerprint to unlock the phone and view its contents. After reading numerous stories about how spouses discovered their partner's infidelity by looking at their devices, I decided to investigate. So, I went into various applications, looked through her email, both personal and work, studied her social media profiles, and carefully checked the contact list for suspicious names and emoticons. But despite spending several minutes on this thorough investigation, I could not find any evidence. The next day, when she woke up, I was still tormented by uncertainty. I asked her for her laptop under the pretext that I needed it for a specific task, and she readily handed it over to me. Taking advantage of the opportunity, I began to carefully examine its contents, desperately hoping to find at least some signs of betrayal. To my surprise, her digital footprint was as clear as newly fallen snowflake. There was not the slightest hint of her betrayal. Moreover, I was overcome by a sense of guilt that in my relentless quest to find out the truth, I resorted to the services of a private detective. When the weekend passed, I felt that I had to turn to the detective and confess to my growing paranoia, expressing a desire that he would stop his annoying investigation. But I decided to be patient and postpone the conversation with the private investigator until Monday, knowing that Leah spends most of her time at home on weekends. At last, the appointed day came, and I contacted the detective, intending to ask him to stop the investigation. But before I could say a word, they immediately informed me that they had stumbled upon some convincing facts that, in their opinion, I should see firsthand. The mere thought that this discovery happened just a week after their employment almost stopped my heart. Overcome with anxiety, I went on the longest trip of my life, which seemed endless to me, and allowed me to sort through a lot of thoughts in my head. When I met with the private detective, my worst fears materialized before my eyes. Leah was really attracted to another person. My heart broke when I saw the pictures of them in an intimate setting, hand in hand, exploring different places together. Unable to contain my emotions, tears flowed down my face. I must admit, I have always been a sensitive and vulnerable person, so it was difficult for me to realize that Leah betrayed our relationship. Everything was aggravated by the fact that the photos captured their trip to a new restaurant that I ordered to celebrate our anniversary, and at which she never appeared. In addition, in the pictures, they were captured in a passionate embrace in the cabin of Leah's car, which further aggravated my suffering. Further facts gathered by the private detective revealed even sadder details. There were cases when Leah and her new companion went to the hotel together, spending the whole night in each other's company. As the truth was revealed, it became clear that the project in which Leah took an active part was none other than the man she held in her arms. It was a real shock for me to find out that her lover was much younger, most likely about 20 years old. During the investigation, it turned out that his name is Ryan. He is studying in the last year of the physics department, and surprisingly, Leah turned out to be his teacher. As soon as the private detective called his name, a wave of recognition swept over me, and my heart sank to an unimaginable depth. Leah often mentioned Ryan in our conversations, appreciating his exceptional intelligence and the ease with which he grasped concepts. She constantly praised his academic achievements and recognized him as one of the most capable students. I knew about this admiration because she often expressed her sympathy for people with a special mind. But I could not imagine that she would commit such a shameful act, betraying our relationship by having an affair with her own student. A mixture of heartache and anger overwhelmed me, leaving fragments after this revelation. Over the past 3+ years, I have made countless sacrifices for Leah, so such a betrayal was even harder to comprehend. Throughout the time we worked together, I did everything possible to make Leah's life comfortable and stress-free. I took over most of the household chores, including cooking, cleaning, and grocery shopping, as she often expressed fatigue. Leah's only job was laundry, which she did on weekends, and I did everything else. When it came to financial responsibilities, we agreed on a ratio of 70-30, with most of it coming from me. I firmly decided that it was my duty as a man to take on more financial burden to help her save money for the future. This decision was dictated by my desire to support her and ease her financial situation. I thought it was natural to offer support and help to a loved one, and that's exactly what I did with Leah. But the most difficult moment in our relationship was the lack of support from my mother. Despite her disapproval, I made the decision to marry Leah, and this choice undoubtedly complicated our relationship. After reflecting on the past and refocusing on the current reality, I pulled myself together and instructed a private detective to continue monitoring Leah's actions. The photographs provided could not satisfy my need for concrete evidence, which prompted me to look for more accurate evidence confirming my suspicions. My determination to catch them in the act intensified. When I returned home, my wounded heart longed to meet Leah, but I did not succumb to temptation. The silence engulfed me, hiding the depth of my pain. The surging wave of emotions forced me to urgently leave the walls within which our broken love was located. The fear of succumbing to anger and causing harm pushed me to collect a few necessary things in the closet. But during this chaotic process, I stumbled upon an object that destroyed all the remnants of love that still remained in my heart: birth control pills. Their presence spoke volumes, extinguishing any glimmer of hope that still remained. At first, I was confused because Leah and I had been trying unsuccessfully to conceive a child for 2 years, and she had no apparent need for contraception. But when all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I was seized with a painful realization: she had been secretly taking birth control pills all this time, deliberately preventing herself from getting pregnant, unknowingly depriving us of the opportunity to start a family. In that heartbreaking moment, I realized how much Leah had deceived me. She let me suffer and doubt our fertility, unaware that she was intentionally taking birth control pills. The weight of this exposure crushed me even more than the knowledge of her cheating with a young man. Immersed in sadness, I clutched the birth control pills, tears streaming down my face as I tried to comprehend the extent of her betrayal. Gathering my strength, I decided to leave the house without saying a word to Leah. I informed her that I was going to my mom's and would be back at the weekend, but it was a ruse, an elaborate plan to see if she would take the bait. That evening, I tried to take refuge in the hotel, wanting to find solace and clarity in the midst of mental and spiritual excitement. The next day, my private detective passed on important information. He diligently tracked Leah throughout the day, and it turned out that she and her lover were heading to my house. This was exactly the case I was waiting for. Under the influence of many emotions, including anger and betrayal, I longed for a dramatic confrontation with Leah. Inspired by the videos I saw in which people bravely confronted their unfaithful spouses, I decided to act in a similar way. In an effort to capture this turning point, I decided to hire a videographer to capture every detail on film. Imperceptibly accompanying the videographer, we drove up to my house shortly after Leah and Ryan. The scene was prepared, and I was ready to meet Leah with all the emotions bubbling up in me. But instead of immediately engaging them in a fight, I decided to wait until they entered the house. After about 15 minutes, I cautiously entered the house, accompanied by the videographer. As you know, Leah rarely locked the front door, especially if she assumed that I would not be there until the weekend. Taking advantage of this, we silently headed to the bedroom, trying not to make a sound. As soft music played in the living room, covering our approach, we stood outside the bedroom door, a mixture of emotions bubbling in my stomach. Anticipation and anger bubbled up in me, prompting me to take immediate action. Without hesitation, I put my foot forward and hit the door with force, destroying the illusion of secrecy that hid their betrayal. In the midst of the events, I directed the videographer to film Ryan standing behind Leah as they performed a sexual act. The sight of their betrayal further inflamed my anger. In a matter of seconds, they rushed to collect their clothes, their actions resembling a stampede of rats seeking cover. As Leah slowly realized the gravity of the situation, her screams and insults filled the air, directed directly at me. Unable to contain my rage, I grabbed her by the arm and dragged her out of the house by force, leaving her defenseless and vulnerable. Her partner, hurriedly pulling on his pants, managed to escape before I could engage in further confrontation with him. The scene was chaotic and filled with violent emotions. The screams of Leah, who was vigorously knocking on the door, reflected the violent consequences of the revealed truth. The severity of the situation attracted the attention of our neighbors, forcing them to come out of their homes to look at what was happening. At the moment of realization, Leah realized the severity of her actions and hurriedly disappeared in her car, leaving the crime scene with Ryan. Without delay, I took prompt measures and sent all incriminating photos collected by my private detective, as well as video recordings made by a videographer, to the college where Leah worked. Inspired by the stories I had heard, I foresaw the likely outcome of such actions, and events unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. The following week, Leah faced the consequences of her actions. She was fired from her college job as a result of the fact that their actions were revealed. Leah faced severe consequences. She was expelled from college, depriving her of any prospects for the future. After that, my phone continuously crackled with her messages containing threats to make my life miserable, but I decided not to make contact. All my attention was focused on getting rid of this toxic relationship and starting the divorce process. All I wanted was to get rid of her presence forever. Leah returned to our house to pack her things, but I never found out about her whereabouts after this meeting. I spent the rest of the week looking for divorce lawyers in our neighborhood, preparing for the upcoming trial. It was clear that the dissolution of the marriage was the only way to move on and get my life back. After a thorough search, I successfully found a suitable divorce lawyer and immediately scheduled a meeting to discuss further actions. Having made a firm decision, I was determined to proceed with the divorce process. A few days later, I met Leah face to face and handed her the divorce papers, which officially meant the end of our union. Her reaction was not at all what I expected. Leah was shocked by my decision to divorce her, but instead of coming to terms with the real state of affairs, she responded with laughter. She claimed that by marrying me, she had done me a favor, saying that I had always been intellectually inferior in her eyes. It hurt me to hear these hurtful words, but I hid my inner shock behind a smile, not wanting her to see how deeply her rude statements hurt me. At that moment, I saw a side of Leah that I had never seen before, the true extent of her callousness and lack of remorse. This deeply disturbed me. I was even more outraged that she brazenly belittled me and boasted about how lucky I was in my relationship with her. She brazenly said that I would soon crawl back and beg her to take me back, unable to live a month without her. Instead of signing the divorce papers, she just took them out of my hands, assuring me that she was graciously giving me time to recover from the offense and rethink the mistake I was going to make. And that's how she left, leaving me alone with conflicting emotions caused by her heartless words and actions. Having kept my discovery about birth control pills a secret, I expected Leah to admit her dismissal from work, realizing that she had crossed ethical boundaries. But to my surprise, she remained silent about it and focused all her attention on convincing me to return to her. Months passed filled with persistent persuasion and discussions until finally, Leah reluctantly signed the divorce papers, and our marriage officially ended. But I didn't know yet that this wasn't the end of our story with Leah. If someone had told me then that it would break up in a few months, I wouldn't have believed it. During our first meeting to sign the divorce papers, Leah portrayed a facade of strength, as if she considered herself the only significant woman in the world. But after the divorce, she changed dramatically. She flooded my phone with continuous calls and inundated my social media accounts with messages on different platforms. It got to the point that I had no choice but to block her number and cut off our connection on social networks. Unfortunately, even these measures could not stop her. A few weeks later, Leah appeared on my doorstep, which was in sharp contrast to her previous assertiveness. She looked completely unhappy, her tear-stained face betraying her inner grief. As soon as I opened the door and Leah saw me, a flood of emotions overwhelmed her, forcing her to fall to her knees in tears. In a desperate plea, she begged me for forgiveness, promising that she would change beyond recognition. She told me about the difficulties she had to go through without me, that she had nowhere to turn, and that she was in danger of having her car confiscated, having lost her job and tarnished her reputation. It was increasingly difficult for her to find work elsewhere. My heart broke when I saw her vulnerable state and listened to her plaintive pleas. Despite the pain I caused her, I couldn't ignore her suffering. This moment challenged my resolve, forcing me to face the complexities of forgiveness and compassion. When I saw Leah standing in front of me, anger flared up in me again. She squandered all her savings on her young student boyfriend, giving him lavish dinners in the best restaurants and dressing him up in luxurious clothes. Now she stood before me penniless and desperate. At first, I instinctively slammed the door and cut her out of my life. But she persisted, pushing her way forward. When her first requests failed, she resorted to another card. Taking a deep breath, she admitted that she had something to tell. Intrigued but still wary, I reluctantly let her talk. When she started talking, the unpleasant truth came out. She had been taking birth control pills for all 2 years of our attempt to conceive a child. This revelation caused me shock and disbelief, mixed with the rage that was still burning in me. Leah admitted that she took birth control pills because at that time she was not ready for motherhood. But now she claimed that she was ready and promised that if I returned to her, she would do her best to conceive a child. She painted a picture of the future in which there would be the family I had always dreamed of, where we would be happy and united. Although I was doubtful, I allowed her to explain everything after listening carefully to her request. But when she finished speaking, I calmly informed her that I already knew about the birth control pills she was taking. The expression that flashed across her face at that moment captured a mixture of surprise and awareness, an image that should be kept in the frame. Looking straight into Leah's eyes, I told her about my feelings with unshakable honesty. I explained that while forgiveness of her infidelity could be considered, the deeper wound she had inflicted on me was beyond healing. It was the feeling that I had been made a fool of. I noticed that she saw how worried I was about our relationship, how I fervently prayed every night for a solution to a situation when it seemed that all other options were exhausted, and all this time she was silent, allowing me to suffer in vain, and at the same time repeatedly uttered her disparaging phrase. It was unpleasant for me to realize that I thought we were on the same wavelength, working towards a common goal, but her silence deceived me. Reflecting on the situation, I admitted my guilt, and allowing doubts to creep into my consciousness, I admitted that I should have been more attentive to the changes in her behavior and suspected that she knew about our struggle. But then I treated these fears as paranoia. With a heavy heart, I resolutely demanded that Leah get out of my territory and made it clear that any further invasion would lead to legal consequences. This meeting was the last time our paths crossed. I've had to go through mental anguish in the past, but the level of frustration and devastation I've experienced this time has surpassed anything I've ever experienced. I had hoped that the pain and anger would dissipate after she finished her career, but it turned out that I'm still struggling with these emotions. It seemed that despite the desire for retribution, nothing could soften the emotional shock that was now consuming me. As I overcame the consequences, I realized that I had to find the strength because it turned out that I had to solve problems alone. 5 years have passed, and I'm happily married. I have a wonderful and loving wife who gave birth to 2 beautiful and intelligent children. My dream of a happy family has come true, and I'm happy. But Leah entered into a relationship twice, but unsuccessfully. Mostly men saw her as a toy, not a wife and mother of their children. Mutual friends told me that Leah is now working in college, but not as a teacher, but as a woman who is responsible for the cleanliness of the floor. In short, she cleans the floors. This smart and beautiful woman chose such a life for herself, and I don't feel sorry for her.